Right now, somewhere in your house, your phone is sitting face up. You keep checking it. Not because you need to, because some part of you is scared of what happens if you don't. You think that fear is about missing a message. It isn't. The real answer is far stranger. Your body is running a survival program that is hundreds of thousands of years old, and it does not know the difference between being ignored and being left to die. Scientists eventually proved this, not with a survey, not with a guess, with an experiment so unsettling that it changed how doctors treat isolated patients to this day. Here is what they found, and why your brain still reacts to loneliness like it's a physical wound. Start with a psychologist named Harry Harlow. In the 1950s, he wanted to understand what baby animals actually need from a parent. At the time, most scientists believed the answer was simple: food, warmth. Nothing more sentimental than that. So Harlow built two fake mothers for infant monkeys. One was made of bare wire, but it held a bottle of milk. The other was covered in soft cloth, but it offered no food at all. If the old theory was right, the babies should have clung to the wire mother. She was the one keeping them alive. They didn't. The infant monkeys fed quickly from the wire mother, then spent the rest of their day clinging to the cloth one. When Harlow introduced something frightening into the cage, the babies didn't run toward the food source. They ran toward comfort. Contact mattered more than calories. Now push that idea further. What happens to a baby who gets neither? A pediatrician named Rene Spitz studied infants raised in institutions during the same era, children who were fed and kept clean but rarely held or spoken to. Spitz documented a condition he called hospitalism. Infants who lacked human contact stopped growing at a normal rate. Some became withdrawn. A striking number of them died, despite having their basic physical needs met. Read that again. Fed, clean, medically cared for. And still, without connection, some of them did not survive. That is not a metaphor. That is a documented outcome. So why would a body do that? Why would isolation alone be capable of killing something that has enough food and warmth to live? Here is where the story gets stranger, and it takes you back roughly 200,000 years to the world your ancestors actually lived in. For most of human history, you did not survive as an individual. You survived as a member of a group. A lone human on the savanna was a slow, clawless, fangless animal with excellent eyesight and not much else. Outside the group, a human's odds against a predator, a rival tribe, or a simple broken leg were terrible. Inside the group, those odds changed completely. More eyes to watch for danger, more hands to share food during a bad season, more warmth on a cold night. Your ancestors who felt comfortable being alone quietly wandered off from the group, and the group was where the food, the safety, and the mates were. Over enough generations, those genes had fewer chances to be passed on. Your ancestors who felt distressed by isolation stayed close. They found the group again. They survived long enough to pass that same distress down to you. That is the mechanism. Loneliness was never designed to make you feel sad. It was designed to make you move. It is a biological alarm built for a world where being cut off from the group was a direct predictor of death. Which brings you to a psychologist named John Cacioppo, who spent decades studying what loneliness actually does inside a modern human body. Cacioppo found that chronic loneliness raises cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. It disrupts sleep. It weakens immune function. It increases inflammation throughout the body, the same kind of inflammation linked to heart disease. In other words, loneliness does not just feel bad. It behaves physiologically like a low-grade emergency that never turns off. Your ancient alarm system cannot tell the difference between being separated from your tribe on the savanna and sitting alone in an apartment with 3 unanswered texts. To your nervous system, both situations register the same way: threat, isolation, danger. That is why an unanswered message can produce a small physical ache. That is why a canceled plan can leave you unexpectedly hollow. You are not being dramatic. You are running software built for a world that no longer exists. There's a further twist here, and it comes from a small town in Pennsylvania. In the 1960s, a physician named Stuart Wolfe studied a community called Roseto, made up largely of Italian immigrants. Roseto had smoking, fatty diets, and none of the exercise habits doctors typically credit with a long life, and yet the town had dramatically lower rates of heart disease than nearby towns with nearly identical lifestyles. The difference wasn't diet, it wasn't genetics. Researchers traced it to something else entirely: tight, multi-generational social bonds, grandparents living with grandchildren, neighbors who knew each other by name for decades, a culture where almost nobody grew old alone. Once younger generations in Roseto started moving away and adopting a more isolated, typically American lifestyle, the town's heart disease rates rose to match everyone else's. The same bodies, the same food essentially, a different level of connection, a different outcome. Decades later, a researcher named Julianne Holt-Lundstad ran a massive analysis combining data from over 300,000 people, looking specifically at loneliness and early death. Her conclusion was blunt. Chronic loneliness was associated with the increase in mortality risk comparable to smoking a significant number of cigarettes a day and a bigger risk factor than obesity. Sit with that for a second. Isolation, on its own, functioning as a measurable health hazard, not a mood, a hazard. So think again about that phone sitting face up. The urge to check it is not weakness, and it's not really about the phone at all. It is the same ancient circuitry that once sent your ancestors sprinting back toward a campfire before nightfall. Except now it fires off in response to a notification badge, a like count, a message left unread. The alarm still works. The problem is what it's built for isn't around anymore. There's no tribe to physically walk back toward. There's only a glowing rectangle promising a substitute for contact and never quite delivering it. That gap between what your nervous system is asking for and what a screen can actually provide is where a lot of quiet modern anxiety lives. Your ancestors solved loneliness by finding people, shared meals, shared fires, long stretches of unstructured time with the same familiar faces day after day for an entire lifetime. Most people today do not have that structure anymore. Communities are smaller, more scattered, more digital, but the alarm inside you never got the memo. It still expects a village. It still expects to be physically known by the people around it. So the next time you feel that small ache of being alone, or that odd relief when a friend finally texts back, understand what's actually happening underneath it. That is not a flaw in your personality. That is 200,000 years of evolutionary history, still running, still trying to keep you alive the only way it knows how. The phone in your hand tonight is not what will actually satisfy that alarm. The people you could sit across a table from are.